Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming out here to Shaver Lake area and being here to talk about a really important subject. My name is Tom Porter. I am the State Forester and Director of CAL FIRE, also the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. And why make such a big effort to focus on Fresno and Shaver Lake in general? The issue here is the same issue that we have throughout the entire state. What we're doing is really making sure that we are making an investment in fire protection, fire prevention, fire suppression that is commensurate with the problem. And this location is perfect for that. Okay, we have the Creek Fire. The Creek Fire is one of California's worst fires ever. The Creek Fire was not a lightning fire, so it's one that we could have seen at any time, even without the lightning that happened, that really consumed a lot of the efforts later in the season last year. It is a fire that happened in the beetle kill epidemic area from about 5 and 6 years ago. So massive amounts of fuels, massive amounts of thermal energy released when those fuels were burned, and really extreme fire behavior activities. Absolutely beyond belief in some cases. But what's the story? The story is no person lost their life, few injuries, relatively few structures for the amount of damage that this fire could have unleashed. And why is that? Has been a long-standing tradition and then has been bolstered significantly recently by Governor Newsom. Governor Newsom, on his very first day, with me in attendance, and thankfully I was appointed on that day, he charged me with doing 45-day report. That 45-day report identified 35 priority projects that we needed to do immediately to protect 200 plus communities in California. Five of those projects were completed before this Cedar Fire started, and they were all within the Cedar Fire footprint. They saved homes. They helped people get out safely on evacuation routes. They saved lives. Those 5 projects were key, along with the partnership and the long-standing tradition of doing fuels and good forest management by the Sierra National Forest, by Southern California Edison, by the private landowners in this area. All of that is key to this, the saves that were made here. The final thing I want to talk about is the regional approach. So you'll hear a lot as we talk about how our investment in forest management is rolling forward about regional approaches, regional collaboratives. What I want to say about this particular area is it is an area of collaboration that is exactly what we want to mirror across the state. So this particular area, Shaver Lake, Fresno County, is a key cornerstone to our strategy to meet the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Action Plan and the efforts going forward to manage California's forests in a healthy manner. All of this can't be done without the collaboration with our biggest partner, National Forest Service, and we are at the table here in Fresno County, and that is very important to us. With that, I am going to pass the mic to Secretary Wade Crowfoot of the Natural Resources Agency of California.
Thanks so much. Again, I'm Wade Crowfoot, our Natural Resources Secretary. First, I want to acknowledge the week-to-week heroism exercised by the men and women of CAL FIRE. Clearly, every summer, CAL FIRE works diligently to respond to these wildfires with partners from our Forest Service and, of course, local firefighters responding through mutual aid. And the governor, our legislature, continue to build CAL FIRE's capacity. In the past 2.5 years, Governor Newsom has directed over $700 million of additional funding to build CAL FIRE's response capacity. That's more boots on the ground, more planes, more helicopters, more state-of-the-art technology. And I think I can safely say that we have the most sophisticated wildland firefighting force in the country, if not the world. But let's be clear, we are not going to respond our way out of this crisis. The science is clear. Warming winter temperatures and warming summer temperatures across the American West are creating more challenging and dangerous wildfire conditions. Consider last wildfire season. 5 of the 6 largest wildfires in the state's history were burning at the same time last summer, including the Creek Fire where we are today. So while we ramp up and continue to build our response capacity through CAL FIRE and their partners, clearly much more needs to be done on a proactive, upfront basis to reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfire. And that's why Governor Newsom convened over the last 2 years a task force to identify specifically what must be done to build our wildfire resilience. That task force developed a set of very specific measurable actions that materialized in the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Action Plan that the governor released in January. And that contains a suite of actions that we need to take on an urgent and large-scale basis across our state, really on 3 dimensions. More resources and attention on building wildfire resilience within communities. That includes defensible space, home hardening, evacuation planning, places of refuge, infrastructure hardening. It also includes more investment and focus on building protection around communities. That includes the fuel breaks that Chief Porter talked about today that are protecting communities, whether isolated communities in the Sierra Nevada like where we are today, or suburban or urban communities in Southern California and in greater Los Angeles. The third dimension of that approach is not only in communities, around communities, but broadly across the landscapes. We need to do more forest management, more large-scale management to reduce our density of our forests, reintroduce prescribed fire, which our tribal communities have been practicing for thousands of years. It's these actions, it's these investments, along with response, that will actually build our resilience to these catastrophic wildfires. In January, Governor Newsom proposed an unprecedented, scaled up, I call it a quantum leap investment in these proactive measures, proposing to the legislature to spend over $1 billion of one-time funding on these resilience measures. We are very fortunate and thankful for the leadership of the legislature in their close alignment with Governor Newsom on making these investments real. So as the governor will mention in just a little bit, the legislature and the governor have agreed to actually deploy over half of that $1 billion immediately through early action, which will provide a head start on all of those actions that I just described, upfront actions to build our resilience. As Chief Porter said, these actions will look differently in Southern California, in the Bay Area, on the North Coast, in the Sierra Nevada. We are not suggesting one-size-fits-all solutions to building our wildfire resilience. Rather, state agencies, the governor, the legislature are proposing to develop and to get more resources into the regions to identify and actually complete the priority projects, whether that's defensible space or home hardening, these emergency fuel breaks, or this broader landscape management. To ensure that these actions actually take place and to hold ourselves accountable, under the governor's direction, this task force that I mentioned is being reshaped, very specifically focused on implementation of this action plan. And part of today's announcement is the reshaping of that task force to very clearly identify how, when we're going to actually be able to complete each of these actions. To work very closely with our federal partners as well as our local partners, such as California's counties and our cities, our rural communities. So while we can't sugarcoat the fact that this summer is going to be challenging, we are just getting out of our second consecutive dry winter. And what we can expect this summer in wildfire conditions is more of the same from last summer. I think I'll end with a note of optimism, because never before has California spent this amount of funding and priority on both responding to these wildfires and ensuring that these catastrophic wildfires don't grow into the dangerous wildfires that they have been in the first place. So I'm very thankful for Governor Newsom's leadership, starting on day one, driving all of these solutions, and frankly, conveying a sense of urgency to agency leaders like myself to actually get this work done. Governor Newsom.
Thanks, Wade, and thanks, Chief Porter, and all of you that are assembled here, particularly men and women in uniform, CAL FIRE, and of course the National Guard. And you can see folks behind me from the Conservation Corps, Operation Rattlesnake, which is a effort pulling folks off the border, and the National Guard to get up here and do some wildfire, field break, and forest management work. Been doing that over now 2 years. But I want to just first level set and just thank everybody for the opportunity to come back and visit this site. I was here not too many months ago then with a candidate as Vice President, Kamala Harris, surveying the site a little bit later in September and trying to understand the magnitude of the Creek Fire. Some 375,000 acres later, 856 structures, fourth largest, most devastating fire in terms of size, scale, and scope in our state's history. This community has been disproportionately impacted. So I want to just acknowledge that, the intensity, the stress, and the challenge, not only that experience last September, but going through the experience at the same time we're trying to deal with the once-in-a-generation pandemic. Those are twin crises, likes of which we hope we'll never have to go through again. And so to the entire community out here in Fresno County, to all the extraordinary firefighters and the folks on the front lines, just hats off, and thank you for your patience, your perseverance, and more importantly, as I travel around and was driving around the sites and seeing people back in their homes and seeing people back out here in these hand crews, to your resilience as well. And it's a reminder of how resilient this state is. Look, Wade mentioned and previewed a little bit about what we're here to announce. I had put out in January a proposal for the legislature to invest a record amount in our home hardening, our forest health, as well as fuel break and vegetation management efforts, $1 billion. To the legislature's credit and to the leadership of the California legislature, they wanted to move forward more aggressively and draw down $536 million to get moving now, to get that ball rolling and to start those efforts with the urgency this moment requires. And so today we're announcing a deal with the legislative leadership, with the Speaker, Anthony Rendon, and with our pro tem, Tony Atkins, that we have their commitment and we have the confidence in the vote being secured as early as Monday and my signature on Tuesday, that will be drawing down $536 million and get these projects moving and start to scale, so we're prepared for this upcoming wildfire season. We also did something a couple weeks ago that got a little bit of attention, but I think deserves to be highlighted again. We put $80,740,000, almost $81 million, to support CAL FIRE, to hire 1,400 firefighters, so we can start surging and preparing for this wildfire season. Well, I used my emergency authority to do that. Again, sense of urgency and recognition of the moment we're in. As Wade said, the hots are getting hotter, the dries are getting drier. There's a new reality. If you don't believe in climate change, you don't believe in science, you believe your own damn eyes. Something is happening as it relates to the issue of climate, and that's exacerbating conditions and making the challenge of wildfire suppression and prevention that much more ominous. And so we are here mindful of the macro realities, also mindful of the situational realities, to do more and do better, not only to address the systemic issues of climate change, and no state in America is doing more in that space, but also to be mindful we've got to do more in terms of forest management. We've got to do more in terms of vegetation management. We've got to do more getting in to our forests and do the kind of work that was being done 100, 2, 3, 5,000 years ago that frankly we haven't been doing in the last century. And we got to own that. I've been around 25 months, and I'm proud of the fact the first action I took as governor of California was up there in Placer County with Chief Porter, announcing our prioritization, and at that time, record investments in this space. But I can't make up for 50 years. We're trying now to do that. And we recognize that that requires efforts to do prescribed burns. It requires efforts to get mechanical equipment out into the forest to prepare for those prescribed burns. It requires hand crews. It requires more personnel, but it requires intentionality. It requires a plan. And we have a plan. 100 directives are part of our action plan. It requires coordination, it requires collaboration, and we have a structure for coordination and collaboration. And that's the task force Wade and his team are leading. And that's to connect tribal lands, private lands, state and regional strategies and plans with the U.S. government. We don't want to be a sparring partner with the U.S. Forest Service. And with all due respect, last few years kind of felt like that. A lot of finger pointing, which was great, highly ironic, when 57% of the forests in the state of California are under federal authority and administration, and that they were cutting forest budgets as we were increasing ours to do the work of the federal government, I say with love and respect, by offering half of our investment to manage federal forests, even though California only manages 3% of the forested land in the state of California. Those numbers can't be repeated enough, because 9 out of 10 members of the public don't know that, and probably half of them wouldn't even believe that. Just 3% of the land in the state of California is under the direct jurisdiction of the state. But that doesn't mean it's not our responsibility to do more and better, to build partnerships with private, we're on private land here, and with the federal government, right behind me, to your left, right, and behind you. And so that's what this is all about. It's getting rid of those barriers. It's not about finger pointing, not about closed fists, open hands, about collaboration, memorandums of understanding. We signed one with the U.S. Forest Service committing to double our forest management, working together in a collaborative spirit. 1 million acres minimum, and we're going to have to do more than that. But the fact that we have that framework is very exciting. The fact that we have a president that wants to fund the federal efforts is also exciting. And the state of California, legislative leaders, we're doing our part, and that's the announcement today with the state's contribution to those efforts. Yes, we're going to do more C-130s. Yes, we have new Black Hawk helicopters coming in. Yes, we're going to have new Helitack crews so you can enjoy the heroism that you saw demonstrably exemplified here at Shaver Lake when we had men and women in uniform coming in through flames against every conceivable ejection of common sense. But their heroism took over, and they flew those helicopters down and saved lives of folks stranded out there that were just looking to recreate and to spend a little time away with their families. Yes, we will have their back as well. More suppression strategies, more prevention strategies, more regional, long-term, medium-term strategies, and a greater sense of urgency than ever in contemporary California history. That's what we're here to highlight. It's what we're here to announce. But let me just say this in closing. We're sober about this. We're mindful. Mother Nature, someone said this once, I think it was Rob Watson, who said Mother Nature is only biology, chemistry, and physics. She bats last, and she bats 1,000. And when you experience what we experienced last year in August, in a 24-hour period, 12,000 lightning strikes, when you experienced last August a heat dome over the entire west coast of the United States with world record-breaking high temperatures in our own backyard, California, 130 degrees in our state, not the Middle East, the state of California. When you experience that, and the experience manifested in 560 wildfires sparking all at the exact same time, even record investments in this space are not enough to deal with the magnitude of that reality. And so this is a strategy of and. It's not about the tyranny of or. With all due respect to those that live in binaries, we don't. Yes, we must deal with the underlying causes of the issues related to climate change, and we are committed to that. And yes, we need to do more on forest management, vegetation management, more prescribed burns, more work to get our forests and fuel breaks and homes hardened and do defensible spaces and prepare and do our best to prevent. And so I'm in that spirit, and I hope that spirit brings not just this community, but this state together across some of these stale differences when it comes to the issues of wildfires that should not divide any of us, because we're all in this one together. And so thank you to Chief Porter, thank you to U.S. Forest Service, thank you to Wade and his team, thank you to all the conservancies out here, thank you to all the partners, local and private sector partners that have really stepped up. And again, thank you to the California legislature for drawing these dollars down and getting us to a point where we can get these dollars to work at a record pace this state has not seen in the past. With that, happy to take any questions.
Good afternoon, Governor. This is Thaddeus Mill at the Fresno Bee. You talked about 1,400 jobs. Who's getting these jobs? Is there effort to recruit locally or particular regions of the state?
Yeah, so I'll ask Chief Porter to come up, who's responsible for getting it. And to be exact, it's 1,399. I mean, if you find an extra person, I think we can fund that. So let's round up to 1,400, but 1,399. And there's components within that. There's surge components, temporary as well as ongoing. I've got a budget that includes an additional $143 million that's in front of the legislature for 30 more fire crews. We've added a lot more engines in the last year as well. This includes Conservation Corps members. There'll be a regional component, there'll be a local component, there'll be a statewide component, but you got the chief here, and he'll talk more specifically.
I will be more specific, but also concise. Really, for the piece of this that is, where are those jobs? Those jobs are going to be local throughout the state. We're going to be adding these fire crew capabilities and the jobs that are associated with those throughout California. So it's part of a strategy that we already had been moving on. There are components that are part of the governor's proposed budget that have been moved forward into this early action capability. So there will be permanent jobs as well as seasonal jobs as well as core member jobs, all created by this, and they will be throughout the state and here in Fresno as well.
And, I mentioned the Helitack teams. The reason we wanted to draw down and move earlier is we want these guys fully operational by May 1st. I mean, let's be realistic. Fire season's already started. We were battling close to like 850 acres up there in Siskiyou. You've been battling something over here in Sierras just in the last 48 hours. We've doubled the number of fires this year compared to last year, where we had over 4 million acres burned already this year. As Wade Crowfoot just said, second year of drought conditions, not yet a drought emergency, but drought conditions in this state. And we're already working aggressively in that space, and we'll be making many different announcements in that space in the coming days, not just the coming weeks. But we're very mindful of what is happening and what happened on April 1st when we had our annual snowpack survey, which showed a significant below average 59%. And that is something that, again, brings me out here today with a deep sense of urgency.
Hi, Governor. This is Jocelyn with CBS 47. I had two questions really relating to the Central Valley specifically. One, you were back here in September with Vice President Kamala Harris. Now to be back here, I wanted to ask you, why specifically Fresno County did you decide to come back here and make this announcement? And second question, just when we're talking about climate and the Central Valley being disproportionately impacted throughout this year, a bipartisan group of Central Valley lawmakers sent you a letter asking you to declare a state of emergency on California's drought and regarding water shortage. I was wondering what your response is to that and if you're prepared to do that.
Yeah, we're preparing to do many things as it relates to preparing ourselves for the reality of moving in now formally into a second year of drought conditions. As it relates to the specific declaration of emergency, which has all kinds of component parts, we're not prepared to do that at this moment, but all of the commensurate components that were part of that letter, we've already been doing, actively have planned to do, and have committed and resolved to do. And so, as I said, in the next days and weeks, we'll be saying a lot more on that subject. But let me just let you know, I've been at Fresno, I think 5 times in 5 weeks. And I'm not saying that to impress anybody, but to impress upon you, it's not a passing interest, the county, to me. It's full commitment. I've been here primarily as it relates to issues of vaccines. And by the way, 1.9% positivity rate, among the lowest positivity rate in the United States of America. 21 million vaccine doses have been administered in this state. It's the 6th most in the world, 7+ million more than any other state. 3 million doses were administered in the last 7 days, which is a record for the state of California. Manufactured supply. We hope everybody is taking advantage, 50 and over, which is what I did last week, of the opportunity to get that shot administered. I got the J&J. As I say, the best of the 3 is the next one available. And I encourage folks to avail themselves, everybody 16 and over, next week on April 15th, where there will be no restrictions in terms of accessing these vaccines. The more people get vaccinated, the quicker we can turn the page and end this pandemic once and for all. But the issue of coming back here in particular is, I attach a lot of emotion around these fires. I've been to too many. As lieutenant governor, as governor, you know, it was interesting that first year I was in office, we had one of the best fire seasons in recent memory, 2019, only to then experience one of the worst in 2020. I'm mindful of the vagaries of Mother Nature, the vagaries of weather patterns, and the challenges that are afoot. And so I'm here because I wanted to see firsthand the progress in terms of people moving back into their homes, and I wanted to see how some of the management and reforestation efforts were looking. And I will say this, it's a wonderful thing to see the crews out here, and wonderful, as I said, the thing that really lit my heart up was seeing that a young girl outside playing just right up the road here. And I can imagine what she went through last September and October, wondering if her home was safe and everything her family went through. So I want to just connect on that level, and that's why I specifically wanted to come back here near Shaver Lake and back to Fresno County.
Governor Newsom, Vanessa Vasconcelos, ABC 30. You touched on this a little bit, but especially with the Creek Fire, we ran into federal, state, private, and county jurisdiction issues. You touched on the response, but is there any effort to make preventative measures uniform throughout? And if so, what does that look like? Well,
I think one of the things, and we were just up looking at the map, and that map that we started with is a very good map to take a look at. You could see where that collaboration is truly taking shape. Because you have a patchwork of jurisdictions, these regional plans, and by the way, the funding that we're putting out, this $536 million, supports regionalism, supports grants for conservancies, supports efforts, private, state, regional, and federal efforts in order to do just that, to knit these together. But you can see a lot of that knitting was already taking shape in the last couple of years here. And Chief Porter said it, I didn't. Better the chief to say it than an elected official. But it is notable that 5 of those high-profile projects, of those 35, where we did some environmental waivers to allow fast-tracking those projects, 5 were already well underway or complete in and around the area. And if you listen to the experts, it had a profound impact at actually mitigating the damage, as significant as it was, but mitigating the damage in terms of structures and the prospect of lives lost. So I'm very proud of those projects, but we're mindful 5 is not 50. And 5 projects as large as they were are not at the scale that is required of millions and millions of acres in the surrounding communities.
When it comes to federal land, has the Biden administration said anything about wanting to support these efforts?
Not only has the Biden administration said something, the president and I had a direct conversation on this topic. During the transition, the president reached out on two subjects: climate change and forest fires, wildfires broadly defined. And we talked about the nuances. It's not just forest fires, wildfires broadly defined. And by the way, one of the significant components of this $536 million is that recognition that some Southern California communities, Malibu area and others, Ventura, very different conditions than up here in lower Sierras or even more broadly in the Sierras. So we are becoming more sophisticated and nuanced in terms of those grants and those funding streams, but also it was all about how we could partner more collaboratively together. And here's why it's more important than ever. When I had that conversation with the president-elect in December, here we are just a few months later, and it was just announced that the west coast of the United States, 77% of the west coast of the United States is in a mega drought, experiencing extreme drought conditions. So this is no longer about California, just Oregon, Washington, Nevada, but now New Mexico, Colorado. You saw some historic numbers in terms of acres burned and wildfires. And so we have a collaborative with the western states governors and the Biden administration. And we have language that they've worked on in the stimulus bills that is very advantageous to our state's efforts and the flexibility, as well as the funding that's come in that we'll be able to draw down, not only as it relates to the stimulus, but also in their budget that's forthcoming that will have specific targeted investments for these efforts. That it? Well, thank you all very, very much for coming out. And again, just tip of the hat to CAL FIRE, to all our mutual aid partners, to local firefighters, men and women in uniform across all jurisdictions and stripes, from the National Guard to California Highway Patrol, the Fresno Sheriffs, and our local law enforcement agencies. Thank you for the work you've done, and we're very mindful of the work we anticipate we'll be demanding of you in the upcoming months. And everybody take care, take seriously these threats, and hopefully this news today comes as a pleasant announcement and a very supportive announcement to get ahead of this year's fire season. Take care, everybody.